The Zagros Mountains form the largest mountain range in Iran, Iraq and eastern Turkey. This mountain range has a total length of 1,500 kilometers. The Zagros mountain range begins in northwestern Iran and roughly corresponds to Iran's western border, and it spans the whole length of the western and southwestern Iranian plateau, ending at the Strait of Hormuz. The highest point in the Zagros Mountains is Dina. These mountains are regarded as sacred by the Kurds. Geology. The Zagros Fold and Thrust Belt was formed by collision of two tectonic plates, the Iranian Plate and the Arabian Plate. This collision primarily happened during the Miocene and folded the entire rocks that had been deposited from the Carboniferous to the Miocene in the geosyncline in front of the Iranian Plate. The process of collision continues to the present, and as the Arabian Plate is being pushed against the Iranian Plate, the Zagros Mountains and the Iranian Plateau are getting higher and higher. Recent GPS measurements in Iran have shown that this collision is still active and the resulting deformation is distributed non-uniformly in the country, mainly taken up in the major mountain belts like Alborz and Zagros. A relatively dense GPS network which covered the Zagros in the Iranian part also proves a high rate of deformation within the Zagros. The GPS results show that the current rate of shortening in Çiyayên Zagrosê is ~10 mm year and ~5 mm year in the NW Zagros. The NS strike-slip Çiyayên fault divides the Zagros into two distinct zones of deformation. The GPS results also show different shortening directions along the belt, i.e., normal shortening in the southeast and oblique shortening in the NW Zagros. The sedimentary cover in the Çiyayên Zagrosê is deforming above a layer of rock salt, whereas in the NW Zagros the salt layer is missing or is very thin. This different basal friction partly made different topographies in either sides of Çiyayên fault. Higher topography and narrower zone of deformation in the NW Zagros is observed, whereas in the Çiyayên, deformation was spread more and wider zone of deformation with lower topography was formed. Stresses induced in the Earth's crust by the collision caused extensive folding of the pre-existing layered sedimentary rocks. Subsequent erosion removed softer rocks, such as mudstone and siltstone, while leaving harder rocks, such as limestone and dolomite. This differential erosion formed the linear ridges of the Zagros Mountains. The depositional environment and tectonic history of the rocks were conducive to the formation and trapping of petroleum, and the Zagros region is an important part of Persian Gulf oil production. Salt domes and salt glaciers are a common feature of the Zagros Mountains. Salt domes are an important target for oil exploration, as the impermeable salt frequently traps petroleum beneath other rock layers. Type and age of rock. The Zagros Mountains have a totally sedimentary origin and are made primarily of limestone. In the elevated Zagros or the higher Zagros, the Paleozoic rocks could be found mainly in the upper and higher sections of the peaks of the Zagros Mountains along the Zagros main fault. On the both sides of this fault, there are Mesozoic rocks, a combination of Triassic and Jurassic rocks that are surrounded by Cretaceous rocks on the both sides. The folded Zagros is formed mainly of tertiary rocks, with the Paleogene rocks south of the Cretaceous rocks and then the Neogene rocks south of the Paleogene rocks. The mountains are divided into many parallel subranges, and origenically have the same age as the Alps. Iran's main oil fields lie in the western central foothills of the Zagros mountain range. The southern ranges of the Fars province have somewhat lower summits, reaching 4,000 meters. They contain some limestone rocks showing abundant marine fossils. Zones. Zagros Mountains follow a NW-to pattern. A common way to divide this large area is considering two parts, i.e., northern Zagros and southern Zagros. Northern Zagros includes Iranian provinces of West Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Hamadan, Kermanshah, Ilam, Lorestan, Isfahan, Khuzestan, Chahar Mahal, Virginia, Bakhtiari, Southern Zagros covers provinces of Kodaluya, Virginia, Bayaramid, Fars, Bushehr and Hormozgan. Another description considers three parts: northern, middle and southern Zagros. Geologically, Zagros Mountains consist of two major parts alongside elevated Zagros and folded Zagros. Elevated Zagros forms the northeastern mountains and folded Zagros stands in the south and west of the elevated Zagros. Heading east, elevated Zagros faces inner highlands of the Zagros Mountains, also known as Sanandaj Surjan Zone. Folded Zagros instead ends in the Persian Gulf in South, Khuzestan Plain in southwestern Mesopotamia in west. Glaciation of the East Zagros. The mountains of the East Zagros, the Çiyayên Zagrosê, Çiyayên Zagrosê and Çiyayên Zagrosê do not currently have glaciers. Only Zagros and Dina some glaciers still survive. However, before the last glacial period they had been glaciated to a depth in excess of 1900 meters, and during the last glacial period to a depth in excess of 2160 meters. Evidence exists of a 20 km wide glacier fed along a 17 km long valley dropping approximately 1500 meters along its length on the north side of Çiyayên Zagrosê with a thickness of 350 to 550 meters, under precipitation conditions comparable to the current conditions. This size of glacier could be expected to form where the annual average temperature was between 10.5 and 11.2 degrees Celsius. But since conditions are expected to have been drier during the period in which this glacier was formed, the temperature must have been lower. Climate. The Zagros Mountains contain several ecosystems. Prominent among them are the forest and forest steppe areas with a semi-arid climate, as defined by the World Wildlife Fund and used in their Wildfinder. The particular terrestrial ecoregion of the mid to high mountain area is Zagros Mountains forest steppe. The annual precipitation ranges from 400 mm to 800 mm and falls mostly in the winter-spring. The winters are severe, with low temperatures often below -25 degrees Celsius. The region exemplifies the continental variation of the Mediterranean climate pattern, with a snowy, cold winter and mild rainy spring followed by a dry summer and autumn. Flora and fauna. Although currently degraded through overgrazing and deforestation, the Zagros region is home to a rich and complex flora. Remnants of the originally widespread oak-dominated woodland can still be found, as can the park-like pistachio, almond steppelands, the ancestors of many familiar foods, including wheat, barley, lentil, almond, walnut, pistachio, apricot, plum, pomegranate and grape can be found growing wild throughout the mountains. Persian oak is the most important tree species of the Zagros in Iran. The Zagros are home to many threatened or endangered organisms, including the Zagros Mountains mouse-like hamster, the Basra reed warbler and the striped hyena. The Persian fallow deer, an ancient domestic cat once thought extinct, was rediscovered in the late 20th century in Khuzestan province in the southern Zagros. History. Signs of early agriculture date back as far as 9000 BC to the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, in cities later named Unshan and Susa. Jarmo is one archaeological site in this area. Shanadar, where the ancient skeletal remains of Neanderthals have been found, is another. Some of the earliest evidence of wine production has been discovered in the Zagros Mountains. Both the settlements of Haji Firuz Tepe and Godin Tepe have given evidence of wine storage dating between 3500 and 5400 BC. During early ancient times, the Zagros was the home of peoples such as the Kassites, Guti, Assyrians, Elamites and Mitanni, who periodically invaded the Sumerian or Akkadian cities of Mesopotamia. The mountains create a geographic barrier between the flatlands of Mesopotamia, which is in Iraq, and the Iranian plateau. A small archive of clay tablets detailing the complex interactions of these groups in the early 2nd millennium BC has been found at Tel Shemshara, along the Little Zab. Tel Bazmujan, near Shemshara, was occupied between the 6th millennium BC and the 9th century CE, although not continuously.